Good afternoon, Miro community. I'm so excited that you're joining us for this session. We'll meet a few incredible people who are using Miro to make a big impact. My name is Giovanni King, and I'm a customer education facilitator here at Miro. And for the next 30 minutes, we'll chat with leaders from two organizations driving change in their community and across the entire planet. The world's biggest challenges are complex. Whether they're local issues affecting a single city or neighborhood, or global threats affecting entire ecosystems. The only way to solve them is to visualize the problem, use systems thinking, and engage collaborators to work towards a solution. Our speakers this afternoon are doing just that. First, we'll hear from Chicago's Chipman Design Architecture and nonprofit My Block, My Hood, My City. Their organizations collaborated to expose youth in their community to careers in design and interior architecture. Lauren and Kyle will share their experience designing and facilitating workshops using Miro, highlighting how the platform allowed them to achieve inclusive and collaborative educational moments for their students. Then we'll zoom out to a challenge affecting the entire world and hear from Christopher Zink, Vice President of Carbon Finance at Conservation International. Chris is a leader in the field of natural climate solutions, conserving millions of acres of forests to fight climate change. Chris will tell us about his team and how they tackle a challenge that is so complex. We hope that these stories will inspire new ideas for you to make a difference in your communities and give you some ideas for how Miro can help. Before you meet our speakers, I invite you to participate in this session. We'll have a few questions pop up throughout the session via the polling feature for you to take a chance at a nonprofit trivia challenge. Our first question being, there are more than how many nonprofits and non-governmental organizations worldwide? Head over to the top right-hand corner of your Hopin window to cast your vote and be on the lookout for a notification indicating a new question has been posted. We'll check back in just a bit to see how you all did. Now to kick things off, let's first hear from Kyle and Lauren Chipman, a brother and sister team and a multi-generational design firm, about how they collaborated to teach under-resourced youth about career opportunities in design. To do so, they partnered with Cynthia Valentine and the Explorers program from My Block, My Hood, My City, a local nonprofit that seeks to expand the youth of horizons of Chicago students. The Chipman Design team created a workshop that taught students the principles of interior architecture using a hands-on learning approach that had the students leverage Miro to create a concept and design for their very own restaurant. Let's take a look at their story.
My name is Cynthia Valentine. I manage the Explorers program at My Block, My Hood, My City. My Block, My Hood, My City is a social impact organization in the city of Chicago with a mission to inspire youth, empower communities to build a better world, one block at a time. The Explorers program at My Block, My Hood, My City aims to expose young people from the south and west side of Chicago primarily to the city. This programming is really important for the young people that we serve and the communities that we serve because these communities are usually divested and there's a lack of resources or a lack of knowledge even for our young people of the resources and the different spaces that they can really, enjoy and be a part of within the city. Engagement with our explorers comes through corporations or small businesses, and Chipman Design Architecture reached out to us to host our explorers.
Empathy and investing in people is one of our key values at Chipman. And I've always been really inspired by the work that Jamal Cole is doing at My Block, My Hood, My City. So we reached out to them to understand more about their amazing Explorers program and how we could become a part of that.
A lot of our young people have never really been beyond their block or their community. So the work that we do, we hope really exposes our young people to a bigger world and to so many more opportunities.
Chipman Design Architecture, we are a full-service architecture and design firm based in Chicago, but working nationally with retail, restaurant, and hospitality clients. What Chipman Design stands in and believes in is a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive future for architecture and design. When we are designing for all, when we are creating a more equitable physical environment, everyone will prosper, and it's going to be a brighter future for all of us. With architecture and design, there's a lot of complicated 3D softwares that we have to use. So how do we bring architecture and design, floor plans, mood boards into the classroom in a way that is accessible, engaging, easy to use, and there weren't any kind of extra software that needed to be downloaded to the students' computers? Miro as a platform allows the students at My Block, My Hood, My City to be able to collaborate, to design, to present in real time.
It is an intuitive means of connecting people visually in the same sphere of thought. So you're working in a canvas that's applying your thought and the thought of others for greater coordination, ideation, collaboration, all these elements that can bring you closer to the thought of another.
The Chipman Design Architecture exploration took place during the pandemic, during a time where physical connection was very limited, right, and pretty non-existent. And so being able to project our host into the space to be able to connect with our young people was really important. And they actually were able to see one another. Every group had someone from Chipman Design Architecture within their board to learn how to use the platform and be able to create their designs. Their hands-on activity was to create a mood board and design their own restaurants.
We talked about creating a floor plan for a restaurant, and we had to do a quick introduction as to what's important.
In architecture and design, you start with the concept, you want to develop the look and feel, and then you can start to lay out the space.
For My Block, My Hood, My City, we had multiple frames serving multiple functions for each subgroup. We had one section that was dedicated to mood imagery, another that was dedicated to space planning on the floor plan. Now we wanted the students to really feel empowered to hop back and forth, to experience, oh, I like this inspiration image, I want to use this arrange this banquette this certain way, or this table layout really matches this picture of this beautiful restaurant.
They looked at the existing images that we had pulled and determined what their restaurant looked and felt like. They also had to create a short narrative in the board as well as name it. And then equally important to creating the design, we had each of the students get up in front of the screen and present their restaurant to the rest of the class. And I think that was really an exciting point, was seeing how engaged the students were and how much they wanted to show what they had created in just 20 short minutes. From there, we then put together a floor plan, and they're able to lay out their seating as well as some really important parts of the restaurant they might not think about. Where do the trash cans go? How do people go through the restaurant in a way that is safe and is taking into consideration accessibility? And so all of these things were able to be accomplished in a short 90-minute session.
I think that something interesting that comes out of workshops is also preparing the participants to present makes them more invested in the work that they're producing, and I think gets people more excited to showcase what they've built together.
It's been such a delight to be able to develop these workshops, to use Miro as a tool and a platform to really create an exciting environment for these students to learn. It gives that flexibility for us to show how exciting architecture and design is, and to really inspire that next generation. We're just so excited to continue this relationship with My Block, My Hood, My City to hopefully inspire the next generation of architects and designers. And We really want to encourage other architecture firms throughout the country to join us in creating that inclusive and diverse future, and really to continue to build a better future together.
Thank you so much to Lauren, Kyle, and everyone at Chipman Design Architecture. It's so inspiring to see the work you all are doing to achieve a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive future for architecture and design. And how you were able to use Miro to not only facilitate the workshop for these students, but also empower the students to bring their visions to life. In fact, I'm so inspired, I feel like I might be in the wrong profession. And thank you to Cynthia and everyone at My Block, My Hood, My City for also participating in this session and for the work you're doing in your communities. Next, we're zooming out to a problem that affects us all, no matter where in the world we are. Climate change is one of the defining challenges of our time, and many approaches are being explored to mitigate its most drastic effects. Today, we're going to learn about one such approach, conserving some of the most critical forests in the world to use the carbon storing power of nature to protect the planet. This approach is called natural carbon solutions, and our next guest, Chris Zink, is a leading expert in it. He'll tell us about his team and why their work is vital in the fight against climate change. Let's meet Chris and hear his story.
Being in the mountains, being in the wilderness, to me that's one of the most exciting things that a human can do. Everybody understands that we're in a climate crisis and we have to do something really fast. Hi, I'm Chris Zink. I'm Vice President at Conservation International, and I focus on carbon markets and climate change. The kinds of projects we want to do are these nature-based projects. We want to be protecting the Amazon rainforest. We want to ensure that places that have been degraded and destroyed are replanted, and the impact that we're creating, the lives that we're improving on the ground, the biodiversity that we're helping to make more resilient. The impact is really at the core of why we do what we do. Conservation International is it's what it says on the tin. It's a conservation organization at its core. We have CI's offices in 30 countries around the world. I went out to university here in Colorado, and after that I was in Sweden. I was largely focused on energy efficiency, renewable energy, methane projects, but not forestry and land use projects. And this was 10 years of work, and all the while watching the Amazon burn. That's when Conservation International reached out to me to lead the work of a new part of their organization focused on carbon finance. Carbon Finance 101, from an economic standpoint, if we can put a price on carbon, that's what carbon markets is all about. It's putting a price on carbon and saying this pollution causing the wildfires that we're experiencing, the increased severity of storms, we need to put a cost on it. So carbon markets allows for regulation to take place based on that concept. There's a lot of complexity in this space. We have local and national governmental policy. We have legal land rights issues to understand and integrate. We have financial markets. This is a market that we're interacting with, and so we have pricing that goes up and down. We have corporates that want to support certain types of projects and maybe value a certain type of activity over another. We have indigenous people and local communities whose rights are at the center of everything that we do. And this whole process can take 2-3 years, and that's just the very beginning, right, of the relationship that we would then establish with that landscape and the people living in that landscape. Generally, we have a contract period that will go out decades, and certainly the relationship that we have in those landscapes go out decades. Some of the projects that we are really excited about right now, one is a climate smart forestry project in Suriname, and that would mean changing the practices in timber concessions in the country of Suriname, which is a highly forested country, and the goal is to keep it that way and to keep the biodiversity intact. Another project that we're really excited about is in South Africa near the Kruger National Park, and it's about rethinking the practices of local herders and farmers, and ensuring that the landscape is having regenerative grass and that we keep carbon in the soil. Another project that we're really excited about is in Cambodia, and it's about protecting a landscape that's threatened by logging, and we're using carbon finance to ensure that it won't be logged, that the folks in the landscape have the resources they need to protect it and have their livelihoods covered. All of this, I have a colleague that calls it beautiful complexity, and that's Bronson Griscom. He came up with the term natural climate solutions. And this beautiful complexity, I think, is a good way of describing it. A lot of people would sort of run away from this sort of complexity. We feel compelled to run towards it. You know, it's a problem that we need to solve. And this is one of the reasons why I found Miro to be a useful tool, quite genuinely. I was introduced to it by Max Harper at Refractive Strategies. I brought him in as a consultant, and immediately we started working together, thinking about some of these topics. He was helping me come up with organizational strategies, organizational design elements, how different parts of the organization kind of interact with that value chain, how we communicate some of these complex topics to different actors, both within the organization and outside the organization, using visualization tools. We had a value chain on a single PowerPoint slide, and what Miro effectively allowed us to do was to take this slide and bring it out horizontally. We can then kind of build on, and then build above and below, creating basically a matrix of which funding vehicles are financing which parts of the value chain, which team members are playing in which part of the field, the ability to kind of like see the same thing and understand where they exist and where they play on that playing field. There's a lot of value to that. Essentially now we're kind of set up to have that conversation, to have people understand where they play, what's their role, what are the gaps, what's missing. There's a huge amount more work to do. There's a number of areas in which we need to really dig into and to ramp up. The rangelands and grasslands in Africa, the Congo Basin. And I think there's a huge role that we as an organization can play, and it's a real ambition for our team to play a role there. It's a little bit scary what we could be facing in coming years, but there's also a lot of excitement and a lot of optimism, and I choose to focus on the optimism and what we can do, what we can change. And it's exciting.
Climate change is without a doubt one of the largest and most complex problems we need to solve. Thank you, Chris, for running towards the complexity to help protect our planet. Your work is defining our future. I'm sure we all learned a lot from that presentation. Chris is actually on site handling an urgent issue at one of his project sites today. So his partner from Refractive Strategy, Max Harper, will be joining this panel conversation instead. Max will share his approach to working with teams like Chris's to make complex work more visual. We'll get to that conversation in just a moment. First, let's review the answers from our polls. So it looks like a lot of us were leaning towards one way or another with some of our answers. So let's start with our first question. Approximately how many nonprofits and non-governmental organizations are there worldwide? And it looks like majority of us got it right, with the answer being 10 million. Our next question, on average, how many hours do people spend volunteering their time throughout the year? Well, the answer, 52 hours on average. And then which 3 states are home to the most nonprofits in the US? The answer is California, Texas, and New York. Our last question, if nonprofits were a country, what would be their largest economy in the world? Economy, excuse me. The answer is 5th. They would have the 5th largest economy in the world. Alrighty, now I'm excited to bring our speakers for a live panel discussion. Welcome, Kyle Chipman and Max Harper. Thank you so much for being here today. So let's kick things off with our first question. I want to hear from both of you all about your history with Miro. Let's start with you, Max.
Yeah, to explain my history with Miro, a little background on myself. I graduated in early 2000 with a major in environmental science and a minor in design and multimedia. And I worked a lot in a variety of different areas in kind of the social and environmental space. My tool of choice in like 2008 was OmniGraffle. And I think a lot of people in Miro remember OmniGraffle. And I used it in lots of different organizational types to help work with complex systems that I'd sort of learned about in environmental science and used best available like design processes. I just really loved in where I would do work where a whiteboard or OmniGraffle would illuminate a complex system in a way that allowed people to really build shared vision around it and really better understand the complexity. By 2015, I was really interested in taking kind of visualization of systems to the next level. Something I really needed to do that was like to learn to code. My partner went to a program at MIT, so I started stalking the MIT Media Lab, got involved in 3D and VR startups and hackathons and various things. And by 2019, I'd prototyped a lot of stuff on the next level of visualization. I had found some stuff that was exciting and a number of things that were revealing that we're not quite ready for the 3rd dimension with our systems visualization, that we need to cross the 2D realm. So about in 2019, I said, okay, what can we do? Where are the tools like OmniGraffle at this point? And one of my friends said, you should check out Miro. It's really coming along. And I checked it out, and I had this long checklist of all these features that I wanted, and it was meeting all of them. And I was like, this is awesome. And then it had this platform where you could code your own plugins. And all of a sudden, the idea for my my company, now Refractive Strategies, came into clarity. And so we're highly centered around Miro and the platform and what it does to unlock teams. And working with Chris was a total honor in being able to do that. Yeah.
Awesome. Kyle, what about you?
Yeah, certainly. So first started using Miro back in 2014 in the pre-Miro days. And it really, before even entering into the timeline, I just want to say how grateful I am for Miro as a tool, as a platform. It's really served a transformational role in the way that I think and approach objectives and structures, taking the elements, abstracting them, and then reconfiguring them in the terms of a schematic to build a solution, to provide an organizational structure. It's been wonderful. A pivot point for me was a personal project I used. Actually built a music composition engine on top of the game Street Fighter, and I used Miro at the time extensively for it. And what it did is prove abstraction and iteration or execution can live alongside each other in this environment. Folded the tool back into the business. It's really proved foundational in a lot of our taxonomical definition or working through taxonomy of the org. And the most fun thing, actually, well, byproduct fun, unfortunately from COVID, but it's really been given a new life and new legs in our design studio and across our teams as virtual collaboration and coordination has become so much more paramount with the distributed workforce. People are able to ideate, collaborate, run design charrettes, run workshops through the tool, both internally and with our clients. So I'm grateful. I'm always grateful for Miro.
I'm grateful for Miro as well. Awesome. So for my next question, this is for you, Kyle. I would love for you to share a little bit more about your approach in creating the workshop for the students at My Block, My Hood, My City.
Certainly. So I'll say one or two brief points about some foundational techniques that I've defined for myself, but really if everyone defines them when they start working on boards, super valuable. One is really define your starting scale. The reason I mention scale is that as you begin to define and develop workshops, working from an established scale lets you iterate the modules you build across all boards and repurpose elements over time. It's very, very valuable. My starting scale is 48-point bold font, mid-stroke line weight. What that does is it lets you both define at a more granular or micro level or a more macro level, kind of move your definition in and out. When it comes to the actual workshop definitions, what you want to think about first is, are you using meetings, which is still in beta, or are you not using meetings? That's going to define a lot of the different ways where you actually execute and build your modules, your points of interaction, or your more passive presentation. Workshops themselves, I define them across 3 different categories. I think in terms of session design, board design, and interaction design. Now, session design, it's got a lot of the kind of classic tropes. You think about total class or audience size, the class or audience experience level, any kind of subgroup or subdivision requirements, as well as fixed scale requirements at export. If you have to export at a letter size 11 by 17 or prepare for screen, defining those elements up front is going to inform how you build the methods of interaction down the line. Second, board design, you can establish things like visual hierarchy, color rules and relationships, and especially implementing branding across the board. For our exercise, we wanted to build all of our kind of subdivided group exercises off the core branding of My Block, My Hood, My City. So really building that feel, that textural element to create visual cohesion across the board. The final point I want to raise on interaction design, which is really the most fun, the most valuable part. How are people interacting with the board? I define it in a couple key territories. 1, are you reinforcing a skill or a learning? 2, are you ideating around an open prompt? 3, are you gathering targeted feedback that can be qualitative or quantitative? Or 4, are you reaching a consensus? That's kind of the toolkit that I see when it comes to defining and designing interaction within a workshop. For our purpose on My Block, My Hood, My City, the Explorers program, it was focused much more on reinforcing the skill and the learnings that they just picked up, looking and thinking about design and architecture critically, and then applying those in terms of space planning and mood image layout. Oh, and the icebreakers too. Make sure you include an icebreaker. Once you wrap all that up, icebreaker to reinforce the skills you build in the workshop.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that insight. That's always one of my favorite tips too. Always start with an icebreaker. And just looking at some of the chatter in the Hop-In chat, a lot of folks were asking, what were those specs? Taking notes. I always get questions around, how to set up a board for a workshop. So I took notes myself as well. So really appreciate you sharing the success of your workshop and how you were able to achieve that.
I will give a brief plug to the community. If you're not part of the Miro community, it's a wonderful place to connect with power users, with new thinkers. Max, I met Max earlier on. It's really a fantastic place. And I do hope to share some of these insights, these techniques in a more relaxed and documented way through the community. So thanks.
Absolutely. You heard it here first, folks. Join our community. All right, let's pivot for a second. My next question is for you, Max. So when Chris reached out to you about consulting for Conservation International, how did you approach diving into his team's workflow to find ways to help?
When Chris reached out, like I was saying in my last point, it felt like a real honor. It's so important that we do this kind of work, this visualization work, understanding these complex systems, and so it's always very exciting.
We can skip.
So I'll take you through a couple of the steps that I tend to go through with clients and partners. First is listening, mapping, sense making, and empathy. So that's going to be listening, reading, and understanding, and really getting a full picture of the people and the mission of the organization. When Chris reached out, he had been tasked with creating an innovative new version of a climate fund for financing climate projects around the world. He had a 40-page PDF operational charter that the people before him had written. And so one of my first tasks was to read it and really begin to understand it. And what I do when I am doing mapping of an organization is I really like to start by understanding the system, by understanding the different entities, the sub-organizations, and the relationships between them. Understanding like the political and emotional landscape of people's fears and hopes, as well as the dimensions of power within an organization. And the other thing I'll really focus on when I'm getting to understand an organization is their language and lexicon. And I'm always keeping in mind, what they mean by the different terms that they're using, because that's going to become important for building a visual lexicon later on. One of the things that I like to do is dimensions and tensions, mapping the tensions in an organization live along some dimension. And this is where story lives in an organization. And so this is, we need A, but a lot of A, but very low B. We need this very fast, but we also need it done well. And so mapping dimensions and tensions becomes something that I like to lean on later on in a visualization capacity. Understanding the complexity challenges and the opportunities for visualizing complexity compellingly and elegantly. I'll say more about that in a bit, but then the next would be, just like any communication task, understanding the audiences. Which audiences are going to be responsive to what kind of visualizations and which types of stories. And so with that, I'd like to then work into the task of let's create shared vision, and just helping teams understand one big differentiation, which is explorational visuals versus presentational visuals. I find that a lot of people see kind of in a PowerPoint mind frame that they're making a final draft for presentation, as opposed to feeling welcome to make a mess, knowing that no models are perfect, but that some are useful. And then lastly, and I know I'm a little over time on this question, I really love Miro for being more than just a whiteboard, being a space for people to congregate. I think of it as an office space. I think of it as project rooms. And so I'm really excited about Miro as it helps teams with what I call operational visuals, visual thinking tools that they can return to organize their work.
I love that. So as a follow-up I have for you, Max, what are some of the clearest opportunities you saw for leveraging visual collaboration in Chris's team? Like, how did you use Miro to address them? Yeah.
So on that last point, operational visuals is sort of, like from kind of that perspective. I found that working in the social and environmental sectors, and you've heard it in Chris's video, there's a beautiful complexity that people are running to really understand complex systems, be it environmental, social, financial. And so I think there's a real job for visualization to help people get complex things done well. And in the Conservation International case, there were certainly opportunities for presentational visuals, like I mentioned, such as a better, kind of Venn diagram nested visualization of the governance structure and the various advisory boards. But the one that really started to shine was where the entire, organization and many of the teams were collaborating cross-disciplinarily. And that was on their financing, their project financing pipelines. This is really from end to end, kind of the value chain of finding worthy projects, cultivating them, financing, and then supporting them long term. And they had, like Chris said in the video, it really helps to be able to take a long, complex process and give it some space to breathe, and then be able to reflect on it, bring in different teams, bring in lot of cross-collaboratory, cross-disciplinary teams to look at it, identify opportunities in it, challenges with it, imperfections in it, and treat it operationally and know that it evolves, that they'll come back to it and tinker with it, that it's not a final draft. And so the project financing pipeline was the number one area that I found in the Conservation International. So it'll be exciting how they continue to work with that and over the year to come and beyond.
That is exciting. Thank you so much for sharing. And I love one point that you made, that it's never the final state. Like, we can always come back to this draft and make changes and make improvements. I think that's something important to really note. Looking at the chat, there's a lot of chatter around some of the insight that you shared, Kyle. So I want to pivot back to you. And I would love for you to share a little bit about what are you looking for and what are you confirming before you actually take a workshop live? There's a lot of folks who are looking for your expertise in this topic.
Oh, please. And that's honestly why I'm so excited to be here, is to share some of these ground level techniques. And if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A, hit me up afterwards. I'm happy to go into depth. I'd love to, elucidate. So a couple of the key checkpoints before taking a workshop live. Again, you're thinking iteratively. You're thinking about modules that can be repurposed. You want to go what I call an iteration run, or kind of like a final pre-flight checklist. That includes frame order, frame and element locking. That's probably the most critical, because people are going to move it around inevitably. I even move stuff around, even though I know what's available to move. And finally, think about frame and content positioning at that 1920 by 1080 kind of screen-centric aspect ratio. I like to keep elements uncluttered so the focus can remain primarily on the frame in question. Finally, you want to think about macro-sized frames so that you can show or hide content in sequence in the cadence of your workshop. A couple other quick points I want to highlight too that were really some of these foundational techniques. One, I think it's wonderful to build current view as start and select preview area into your muscle memory. That's going to help long-term make navigation and intermediate access of the board a lot more smooth, but also in that thumbnail view at that project level, make it a lot easier to find your content down the line. Another great technique, keep in mind that any element, object, sticky in Miro can be linked to another element. Right-click, copy link. What that allows you to do as your boards kind of grow organically and blossom in size, it allows you to create these hotspots so that you can navigate much more quickly around key areas of focus. Finally, 4 kind of mechanical keyboard and mouse-centric techniques. One is Alt on the PC, Option on the Mac, click and drag. That creates an instance of an object that saves your clipboard to copy text, styles, any number of items. Additionally, holding down Alt or Option and then recentering or scaling around a center point, that's going to allow you to set your X and Y alignment and then rescale to size as appropriate versus the rest of your objects. 2 more, Control or Command Shift C, Control or Command Shift V. That's copy a style, paste a style. That's going to get you really tight and executing at the brand level for visual consistency very quickly. And then finally, page up, page down on your keyboard. Those are going to give you kind of proxy or AirSats layering solutions so that you're moving, you can't move, you kind of stack items above or beneath each other. Those are all wonderful techniques, and I'm glad to share them here.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope everyone was taking notes. That as a facilitator myself, a quick little plug, one of the questions I always get is like best tips, best tricks for designing a workshop board. And so I'm going to point everyone back to this session because Kyle, you have laid them out. And so I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I see a lot of chatter around some of the information that Max has also shared. So a quick question that I saw pop up in the chat around the operational model and what things should be included in that. If you wanted to shed a little bit of light and insight, Max, for us.
Sure. I am looking, I don't know which particular question. Oh, yeah. A question from Thomas Larson. What should be in an operational model? So a few of the things that I think are important in a really good operational model is the combination of a value chain mapped with a customer experience, or in the case of these, nonprofits and change the world, sometimes it helps to think of it as a stakeholder or a beneficiary journey map, and seeing the two map together. How is it that we deliver the service or product, the experience, and what is the experience that the others go through? And then I think of I have the book right here, an excellent framework known as Milky Way by some excellent consultants out of Sweden, I think, that have really put a lot together. You can find stuff at Milky Way enterprise architecture, which I think is an excellent way of looking at stuff. So organizations will have their capabilities, which is not necessarily a team, and they will also have the information technology systems that each capability uses to communicate with one another. And by mapping, the system of your socio-technical resources, you can unpack lots of complexity and get really organizational around it to create a really cool shared visual mental model for your organization.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Max. I know that was a question we put you on the spot, but folks are eager to hear from both of you all and get your insight. And so they're a little curveball there. So I have another question, my final question for you all. Let's imagine I had a Miro magic wand to grant you one future request. What are you wishing for? Let's start with you, Kyle.
To begin, I will give a shout out to Max. He builds remarkable tools through the API, and he has actually identified and addressed, I don't know if it's fully released yet, but color management in Miro. That's been a long time real driving need, and it's what he builds is beautiful. So hit up Max after the conference and see what he builds. Specifically, though, I would say twofold. One is, as elegant as the experience is working within a board, working outside the board across a directory level, whether that be projects or across teams, is relatively inelegant, just in juxtaposition to the elegancy of in-board work. So I'd love to have a kind of rethink about the directory navigational experience in the platform. The second one is opening boards with public access links and inviting collaborators as commenters is smooth, but even more frictionless collaboration for license holders across teams. That would be something that's consistently cropped up in my experience ideating outside the org. And I just think, intention, get a little, it's elegance of thought and approach. Those are my two magic wand requests.
Love it. What about you, Max?
Thank you, Kyle, for the kind words. We actually have a session tomorrow where we're going to live code a thing, and the session title is around extending the Miro magic. So we do kind of think that the API gives us a little bit of our own magic wand, but and that is really awesome. But I would say the one that's kind of coming to mind for me is more resourcing from Miro around youth education, how Miro becomes a communication and thinking tool for the next generation, and empowering them and their imagination. And so I think that I would just love to see ways that Miro can enhance itself to embed into education curricula, education platforms, and then sort of build its own sort of youth-oriented visual thinking curricula. So I think that would be my magic wand request.
I feel like your magic wand requests, both of them were very on theme. You all were thinking about others with your requests and how to make this process more seamless and also integrate Miro more into youth education. So I really love that. Thank you all so much. Hopefully our product team was online listening. So I want to thank Max, Kyle, Lauren, and your teams for participating in this session. We want to continue highlighting organizations using Miro for good. So if you have an interesting story to share, connect with us on LinkedIn or join our ever-growing Miro community. I also want to thank all of you in the audience for attending today's session. But the fun is not over yet. We have so much more in store, and we hope to see you back for day 2 of Distributed.